Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Beyond Allegations. I'm your host Hazeem Arif, and this is a show where we tackle some of the biggest allegations that people raise against Islam. This is a platform for open conversation and discussions. This is why joined with us today is our studio audience, consisting of young Muslims with their own unique views and perspectives. The prevailing anti-religious shift in Western culture is having detrimental impacts on society. Children are confused about their identities, the family unit is splintered, and parents are becoming increasingly unaware of their responsibilities towards their children. And we see, for every social issue within society, a cure is present within Islamic teachings. Today we are discussing one such aspect of Islamic philosophy which stands at the root of preventing many societal ills and diseases that we see in the 21st century. And that is the Islamic teachings of modesty and boundaries between men and women. Let's get down to today's discussion. I want to first open this up to the audience and ask you about your reactions. When you explain Islamic boundaries, the teachings that Islam has about interactions between men and women, what kind of reactions have you faced talking to your colleagues, talking to your peers and friends? Does anyone want to contribute? Yeah, we'll go here. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. So once at a tabligh stool, a Christian man and his wife came over to have a conversation with us. And after our conversation, they were leaving, we shook hands with the man, but not with his wife. Okay. And when we explained why, she was very, understanding, respectable, and she also liked the idea of these boundaries.
Okay, brilliant. Okay.
Just to add to that, I think the way we perceive Islamic teachings is different to how the Western society or the media portrays Islamic teachings. So it's quite important to relay that message in a very respectful and positive way. Yeah. So I think that's a key point. And a lot of people within, work environments or social environments really appreciate when you actually educate them and tell them how Islamic teachings relay this message and why it's important to have these certain boundaries.
Okay, Jazakallah. You will come over to Mahir.
I once had an experience at a parent-teacher meeting with one of my teachers where at such meeting I didn't shake her hand. Okay. And it was quite nice because the following day she actually approached me and asked why, rather than judging me straight away. And it was nice explaining to her my religion, my beliefs, and she actually really enjoyed it. And she was very she reciprocated a lot of good energy. Okay. She explained how she had a similar occurrence where another male colleague of hers shook her hand for a bit too long, and it made her very uncomfortable. Yeah. And sharing our Islamic teachings, she really emphasized that having these teachings kind of made her feel more comfortable as well, how they were in place to have appropriate relationships at workplaces. Okay,
Jazakallah. So the overarching sentiment I'm getting is that the reactions have been fairly positive. So it's quite interesting. I want to now come over to our panelist, Danish Sahib. My question to you is, what is the concept of Mahram in Islam, and how does that shape our interactions with the opposite sex?
Yeah, so this is a term which probably many people have heard before but may not know what it actually means. So the term mahram actually comes from the same root word from which the word haram also stems from, which is the root word of harama. And linguistically speaking, it gives the impliance of forbiddance. So a mahram relation is someone with whom marriage is forbidden. Okay. And this instruction and the details of this have been given by Allah the Almighty in the Holy Quran in Surah Nur, verse 32. In which Allah the Almighty has explained that for a woman, her father, her grandfather, her sons, her nephews, these relations, among others, are forbidden in marriage. And the same goes for a man, that his mother, his grandmothers, his nieces, they're all forbidden in marriage to him, and among other relations, as I mentioned earlier. And these relations which have been forbidden in marriage, this also allows for that person to have a greater ease, and he's more comfortable when surrounded by those people. So it's not just that you can't marry these people. This is where parda also comes in, where parda instructions have also been eased when you're around these certain people. Yeah. But what's important to understand is that these rules aren't there to prohibit interactions between a man and a woman. In fact, it's the complete opposite, and it allows a man and a woman to interact, in public spheres, to be able to interact with each other, but in an environment which is safe, and it provides interactions which are able to be structured in a way which allows both parties to feel comfortable.
Okay, you mentioned parda. Could you just give some more background to what parda is?
Is parda meaning the covering, which for a woman may be the covering of from her head to her toe, but for a man it also would mean the lowering of his gaze.
Okay, so there's a concept of parda. So for a woman, it's like for both men and women, it's covering modest dressing, covering. Okay, perfect. I want to now come over to Ahmed. So you've explained, Danish, you've explained what mahram is. Ahmed, can you tell me why this distinction has been made by Islam? What's the purpose? What's the philosophy behind it?
Jazakallah, Hazeem, that's a really important question. So essentially, Islam recognizes the natural differences between men and women and the natural attraction that's there. And that's why it encourages prevention over punishment. Okay. So the Qur'anic approach to this is actually to cut the sin at its root rather than to react to it later. So Islam sets clear lines between mahrams and non-mahrams to avoid casual mixing that can lead to temptation. There's a saying of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said that when a man and a woman are alone, Satan is the third. Okay, so this just reflects the psychological reality that unguarded closeness can lead to sin, sometimes even unintentionally. Okay. And the Prophet Muhammad, he's actually also said that Islam closes all doors that may lead to sin, so that people, they remain pure in both thought and action. And that is why in the Holy Quran, Allah Almighty has said that وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Allah Ta'ala hasn't said don't commit zina, don't commit adultery. Allah Almighty states don't even go near it. So that is the Islamic approach. So Islam is all about guarding dignity and personal space, which also ensures that interactions, they remain respectful and appropriate, especially between genders who are not closely related. And the bigger goal in this is it creates a society where people are valued for their character and their intellect rather than their outward appearance. Yeah. So in essence, the Mahram system, it promotes piety, mutual respect, and it just preserves that strong family unit.
Okay, so you've mentioned a really good point, how Islam literally tackles any potential ills in society at its very root. It stops it from happening in the very first place, which is, of course, something, as the trend we've been seeing over the past few episodes, is that Islam really puts in that preventative teaching, which stops these ills from coming out, these diseases coming out in the first place within society. So, Jazakallah, Ahmed, just back to Danish. Of course, the audience, their experiences in their own circles has been fairly positive. However, on a larger scale, we do face we do face criticism when talking about these teachings within Islam, especially within the society that we live. Why do you think that perception, negative perception of these Islamic teachings on boundaries and mahram, why do they exist?
It's a great question. I think it's just a clash of cultural norms, but also maybe an intolerance towards Islamic teachings itself. Why is it that only when a Muslim tries to practice his belief is he scrutinized? Why is it that when a Muslim does not extend his hand forward to shake the hand of a female, like in the case of Khabib quite recently in the Champions League final, that why is it when the female presenter extended her hand and he respectfully, very respectfully, did not do anything to show any sort of offense or any insult, why is it that he was so much criticized around the world, so much so that presenters on LBC were even talking about how he did wrong? Why is it only when a Muslim does that is this questioned? When throughout the world there's so many different cultures, all with their own different types of greetings and how they feel comfortable and show their respect in different ways. So I think it's very important to understand that, just because in the West they have a certain way doesn't mean that that's the universal way of doing things. We look towards Japan, we see that they simply bow, and that's their form of greeting. There's no form of physical touch whatsoever, but no one says anything to that. Or for example, another Hindu he'd simply just place his hands together and may accompany with a simple bow. Again, no form of physical touch, but again, no one blames a finger towards them. Only when a Muslim does so is this discussion taking place. And this is all done in Islam to protect the dignity both of men and women and prevent the objectification of both parties. And recently, in recent times, there's a big trend of platonic relationships. And regarding this, there was a study which took place, and the result of that was that 62% of both men and women said that between cross-gender relationships there was sexual tension present, which would ultimately lead to indecency. And that is what Islam is there to prevent.
you mentioned the study on the platonic friendships, and you might get some people who say that, okay, having these boundaries between, for example, in a relationship, they have boundaries on, they can't befriend someone else from the opposite sex whilst they're in a relationship with someone else. Someone might come out and say, okay, that just means that you don't trust your partner. That's just like a lack of trust. But on the, to rebut that, on the other side of that argument, why is that question even raised in the first place? Because you have many relationships now, they set that boundary for their partner themselves, which shows there is a need for a teaching, for a boundary there in the first place. And Islam, again, comes in and provides that for that couple. And that discussion happens quite regularly, commonly, between couples, is that they put that boundary, that restriction on their other half, on their other partner. And the fact that conversation is even being had in the first place shows the need for that teaching. So
I guess Islam has made it for easier.
Exactly. So Jazakallah Danish, now back to Ahmed. Talking of these criticisms, one such criticism is that these teachings are discriminatory towards women. Is that the case? Is there, what's the difference between setting these healthy boundaries and being oppressive or being sexist?
Jazakallah Hazeem, that's a very important point to clarify. So Islamic boundaries between genders are mutual and they apply to both men and to women, and they're not one-sided. So women are expected to observe certain boundaries from non-Mahram men, and likewise men are also expected to observe certain boundaries with non-Mahram women. For example, the Qur'anic injunction to lower the gaze and to guard modesty, it's directed at both believing men and believing women. So Allah Almighty states in Surah An-Nur, verse 30, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. That say to the believing men to lower their gaze and to guard their private parts. And in the very next verse, verse 31 of Surah An-Nur, Allah Almighty states, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنَّ. And that say to the believing women that they lower their gaze and they guard their private parts. And it's in this verse that Allah Almighty continues to outline the injunction for covering for women. So it's not just about clothing actually, it's actually about behavior and attitude for both genders. And a key point here is that men are actually commanded to lower their gaze before women. So the purpose of these boundaries is not to suggest that one gender is inferior to the other. Rather, it's to acknowledge that there are natural gender differences and to channel interactions in a respectful and a dignified manner. So the difference between settling healthy boundaries and being sexist, it lies in this intent. So in this intent and the mutuality of it. So sexism implies that an unfair power dynamic or a belief that one gender is superior to the other. But Islamic boundaries, when understood correctly, they're mutual, so they apply to both men and women, and they're meant to preserve the dignity for both genders. Okay, so even if you look at just widely accepted things in society like public restrooms, separate changing rooms, women-only gyms, all of these things, they're not seen as oppressive, but they're actually, they're understood as practical solutions for privacy and comfort. So in the same way, the Islamic boundaries, they also aim to provide a moral framework that preserves dignity and it prevents the objectification and the undue pressures that men and women both face.
Yeah. Tika, Jazakallah, Ahmed. I want to now open this up to the audience. So you have something to say? Yeah, go on.
I think that was quite a very strong answer, but I would like to add something. In the recent times of COVID, everybody was covering their mask, their face with masks, right? And hijab and parda was outlined in the Quran 1400 years ago, right? So in that time, when this was outlined, as you can see now in the recent times, people are covering their faces when they're going out. So surely there's some sort of teachings that the Islam and the Quran had that is being shown now, right?
So you're getting many people who are feeling comfortable outside because their face was covered.
Exactly, and they can go wherever they want, and they were maintaining social distance and maintaining that boundary with other genders as well. So I think that's something to reflect on.
Again, that goes to show that inadvertently the need for these Islamic teachings are being shown always in society. Exactly. Jazakallah. So I want to now again open up the discussion to the rest of you. Is that why is it important to have these boundaries? That what are the negative impacts? What are the dangers of not having these boundaries implemented? Yes, we can come over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. In the society that we live in nowadays, I feel it's very important to have these boundaries because things such as the probability of cheating and disloyalty in relationships increasing is truly because of the fact that these boundaries are not set, and the boundaries that are set in Islam. And it's not oppressive towards either gender because Islam treats these boundaries as equal towards each sex.
Tika, Jazakallah, thank you. You know, I just want to come back to your point. You just reminded me, there was a study which I read quite some time back that they studied those males who were guilty of sexual abuse, and they studied their past and their childhood, and they saw that when they were exposed to, as a child, to sexual overtones, that was one of the leading causes for them to commit those crimes in the future, which really shows you that these preventative structures placed within Islamic literature that Allah the Almighty has given in Islamic teachings has literally been a protection for crimes which you wouldn't even conceive of if that was implemented from an early age, from the very beginning of a child's upbringing. And again, something which is missing from this society's structural basis, this society's trends. And that again goes to show how important these boundaries are, how important adhering to Islamic teachings is. So, Jazakallah, this discussion was incredible. I want to now come back to Danish. Can you tell me more about how some of these boundaries of interactions between men and women we can already see in society? Do we see them in society, and in what different aspects can we see this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think society is unknowingly already using some of the principles and the boundaries that Islam has already set from before. You know, everyone, even us, everyone has certain boundaries, certain levels, certain zones with which they interact with certain people. For example, there'd be the intimate zone that one may use with their spouse, a personal zone that one would have with their friends and their family. So they'd have, a few more barriers, a bit more reserved. Then they'd have the social zone and a public zone. And as you go through these zones, they'd have more and more barriers that they'd have between them, and they'd be more and more reserved. So, as I said, everyone's already has these boundaries, has these zones, and these are very important. And any violation of these zones would cause discomfort to either party, and there'd be anxiety between them, like, why are you crossing me in this certain way? Yeah. But this is regardless of religious beliefs. This is not just Muslims saying it. This is, as I said, everyone has these innate boundaries that they already have. And looking towards society as a whole, we see that as Ahmed mentioned earlier as well, that gyms have certain timings where it's women-only time, allowing them to do what they need in their own comfortable area without the worry that someone may be looking. Or even swimming pools, they have pretty much all swimming pools have women-only times. Yeah. And even in India, they have train carriages, probably other countries as well, where it's only women-only carriages, so they can travel safely without the worry of any man taking advantage of anything. So these are principles and boundaries that Islam has already set from thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and also you've mentioned these examples. One does spring to my mind is that His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be his helper, mentioned in one of his speeches that there is a famous pop singer, and she was advocating for women-only concerts, which shows that even at the highest level of entertainment, they recognize a need for a safe space for women and a segregated space for women. So Jazakallah for your answer. Now, coming back to Ahmed, can you tell me more about the negative impacts on society that can occur if these boundaries aren't adhered to?
Yes, Hazeem, so we can see that when Islamic teachings on boundaries between men and women are ignored, we see real and harmful consequences in society. So Islam sets these boundaries not to limit freedom, but to actually protect human dignity and the institution of family. And we can see the impact that these boundaries, when they're not being followed in society, we can see the impact they have on families and relationships. So in many modern day societies, casual relationships and open mixing between non-mahrams have led to things like a rise in infidelity, increasing divorce rates, and just a lack of trust within marriages. And as a result of this, we've got more and more broken homes. We've got more children growing up without stable family structures, and things like emotional trauma that often passes down generations. Secondly, we can also see in workplaces, universities, schools, and just in public spaces that ignoring the Islamic boundaries has contributed to things like, as Danish mentioned earlier, the #MeToo movement, and just more and more harassment and misconduct claims. Islam's teachings, however, like lowering the gaze and maintaining respectful conduct, they act as a preventative safeguard against this. Thirdly, we can also see in modern day advertising and just in the media, they ignore modesty completely, and as a result of this, women are being judged for their looks, not their character. They're being objectified. We've got unrealistic beauty standards and a rise in mental health issues like body image anxiety. And all of these issues, they create a society with emotional instability, things like anxiety and depression. And all of this could greatly be reduced if the Islamic boundaries were understood and respected.
Yeah, and also not to mention that children have such easy access to all of this.
Exactly.
You mentioned advertisements. They can be driving down the highway on a billboard, they'll see for a perfume. And this is widespread. And it has detrimental, lasting impacts, like my brother mentioned here, on future crime rates, on how that child might grow and develop in his future, and what he might, or what she might go on to live life.
More than just that, smartphones. Everyone's got a smartphone in their pocket, and they've got direct access, like a dangerous level of access, literally at their fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. You had your hand up. Can you get the mic to him, please? Thank you.
I think the key is just respect and dignity. That's why Islam has instilled such Islamic teachings from the start 1400 years ago, because these social norms were about to come in place. As we can see now, they are coming in place. Like Danish mentioned, we are already seeing the people are following Islamic teachings without even realizing. So it's all about respect and dignity within people in this day and age.
Yeah, Zakir mentioned that because that leads me on to the question I want to open up to the audience, is that how do you maintain that Islamic identity and adhere to those teachings whilst living with these boundaries in this society? Yeah, we'll come to you, please.
Assalamu alaikum. So yeah, this is a question that I've been asked multiple times as well by some of my siblings and some of my cousins, and I always quote to them what Allah revealed to us in Surah Al-Adhab with Inna al-Muslimina wal-Muslimati wal-Mu'minina wal-Mu'minati, meaning the Muslim men and the Muslim women, and the believing men and the believing women. It refers to both. Yeah. Both the men and the women. And then when we see the narrations of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we find that when a girl is born, when a baby daughter is born, then she becomes the reason, of course, if her father raises her correctly, teaches her everything correctly, then she becomes the reason why her father enters Jannah. And then when she goes on to marry, she becomes the reason why her husband completes half of his deen. And when she becomes a mother, then we all know the narration that Jannah is under the feet of your mother. Yeah. So these are all of the narrations and the teachings that Allah has taught us through the Holy Prophet Muhammad to say that this is what our identity is, and this is what this should be the responsibility of all of us, to take care and look out for all of our brothers and tell them that we should be doing this because this is our identity. Yeah. And anybody that takes this out of proportion, it's misunderstood this. Then we've mentioned this countless times. Amir Bhai has mentioned this, Danish Bhai has mentioned this, that every single factor, every single Islamic teaching was given to us to protect us, to safeguard us from all of these things. Yeah. And this is what our Islamic identity is, and we need to adhere to it.
I think we always fall into a cycle of explaining ourselves or justifying our actions, but rather, I think after this entire discussion we've had today, is that there are issues which are even being recognized by non-Muslims who are living in the society, and they recognize that these are issues that need to be dealt with.
Exactly. And
we are giving teachings, we are practicing these teachings which would prevent them. And that is, I think that's how we be proud. I think in invoking that element of being proud of our Islamic identity.
Yes, definitely.
Because this is not just helpful for us, but also helpful for all of the ills and diseases we see in society. Yeah. So Jazakallah for your point. Yeah, I'll come back to you for your... You go.
Assalamu alaikum. Like you said, we should confidently follow the teachings of Islam and keep our Muslim identity. But as Danish Bhai was saying earlier, in the Champions League final when Khabib didn't shake K. Abdul's hand, he did it respectfully. Yeah. So what we should understand is we should follow the teachings that we do, but also do it with respect. Yeah. And also educate the people as to why we do it. So then they understand the reason as to what we do, and we should do it with confidence and like you said.
Jazakallah. Thank you. I'll take one more contribution. I'll come over to Mahram.
I think it's also very important to not see boundaries as a restriction. It can also be a way of having mutual understanding between two people or a community. We have these quote-unquote rules and regulations that are put in place by Islam, but honestly, they're a way of helping us as humans, as people, thrive in our communities.
Yeah.
I think it's important to not just see them as a way of preventing us from doing something, but rather enabling us to strive to the apex of whatever we are doing as a positive impact on our community.
Okay, Jazakallah Mahir. I want to now come back to Danish. We've spoken about handshakes and how Islam has told us to maintain a level of some boundaries between men and women. What broader principles does Islam teach of how we interact with the opposite sex?
Yeah, as you mentioned, handshakes, it should be understood that, especially living in this society, that handshakes are not the only way to show respect to someone. I mentioned earlier that every culture, different parts of the world have their different ways of greeting each other. Handshake is just one of them. But what Islam teaches is for us to value the other person's character, their intellect, and their contribution that they make to society, rather than just focusing on their physical appearance or how they may put their hand forward to you or hug you or something. But this is the key to honouring both men and women, and that's what Islam teaches.
Yeah.
Even if we look towards when choosing a spouse, regarding this, the Holy Prophet ﷺ instructed Muslims that there's different reasons for which one may marry a wife. One may be her beauty, one may be because of her family or her wealth or her religious commitment. And the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, instructed us that we should prioritize the religious commitment of a woman over all else. So that's what Islam teaches, that look at a person's character, look at their connection to God, rather than just looking at the physical appearance. And in public and professional life, Islam promotes this and says that our conduct should be dignified, not just, whoever looks better, treat him better than someone who doesn't look as good. That's what Islam teaches, and to find a middle ground. That's what Islam teaches. It's not extreme in either way, not too oppressive and not too relaxed that it leads to indecency.
Absolutely. Just now come back to Ahmed. How do these teachings empower both men and women? It's not, obviously he's mentioned that it's not oppressive, so how does it empower?
Hazeem, this is a key point, and Islamic boundaries, when understood in their true spirit, they're actually empowering and not restrictive at all. And individuals are valued for their character and abilities, and not for their looks or casual availability. And this helps both men and women operate in society based on merit and conduct rather than appearance. And Islam removes the pressure to conform to superficial beauty standards, and a woman's worth is not based on how she looks, but rather on her righteousness and character. In Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 60, Allah Almighty states, ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَن يُعْرَفْنَ فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ, that is nearer that they may thus be distinguished and not molested. So this verse shows that hijab and modesty are actually about preserving honor and not erasing identity. Secondly, these guidelines, they protect men and women from things like unwanted attention, harassment, and just ambiguous social situations that may arise due to a lack of having these boundaries. And they help create a safer and more respectful society for everyone. And thirdly, they also foster self-respect. So having clear boundaries builds a strong sense of self-worth, confidence, and just personal dignity. So as a result of that, for women, there's no pressure to match these beauty standards, and they've got freedom to take part in public and professional life with confidence and clarity. And for men, they're encouraged to interact respectfully, focusing on character and contribution. So this actually helps combat objectification and promotes genuine respect in society.
Jazakallah, Ahmed, for that, for your answer. It is quite clear now. The critiques of Islamic principles have it completely wrong when they say and raise fingers at Islam, claiming it is outdated, oppressive, or backwards. Children of the 21st century are needlessly exposed to sexual overtones which are so easy to come across in adverts, TVs, and social media, leaving their developing minds distorted, leading to a litany of ills later on in life. And the very same issues which women themselves in the West are advocating for would have been solved if these Islamic principles were implemented and not shunned to begin with. Where Western culture fails and splinters, Islamic teachings and principles thrive and flourish. If you want to be a part of our studio audience and have your say in our discussions, please do get in touch with us. From all of us here, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.